We're getting close to one more chapter in this war. It will be moved towards the Russian territory, I'm sure about it. There are now talks ongoing to let Ukraine to use ATACMS and other Western-made weaponry, first of all American-made weaponry, on the Russian bases on the Russian territory. For example, the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Mike McCall, today mentioned that Ukraine should be granted the permission to use the long-range weaponry to target Russian bases outside Ukrainian territory. By the way, Mike McCall is the House representative from Republican Party. He represents 10th Congressional District of Texas. It is great that we have healthy Republicans who support Ukraine. By the way, we're gonna speak about Mike Johnson, who also stated something interesting in favor of Ukraine. Hello my friends and welcome, my name is Dennis and this is the latest update from Ukraine. So today there were some of the listenings or audition in the House. Blinken was presented. Let's listen to the short presentation and dialogue between McCall and Blinken. By the way my friends, there will be some of the political bias. Don't put attention on that.
Lastly, Ukraine. We have a really bad situation going on, as you know. This is a sanctuary zone that the Russians have created. And what they're doing is they're lining up all their artillery and rockets and missiles just across the Ukraine border that they then use to attack the Ukrainians. However, your administration and Jake Sullivan have restricted the arms use so that Ukraine cannot defend itself and fire back at Russia.
Well, indeed, Russia created some sort of the buffer area which they used to accumulate their forces and to attack, for example, Kharkiv Oblast, and also there will be attack for sure on Sumy Oblast as well. Still, Ukraine may use Soviet-made weaponry like artillery, but it is in lack of the range. Also, Ukraine has Soviet-made .U, but just some of the units. Ukraine needs to use those with care just in case we need .U for the other points of defense. So the best scenario for Ukraine is to obtain the permission to use Western-made weaponry, but it should be done right now, because otherwise it could be too late, because Russia will strike Sumy and other regions from this buffer zone. Let's continue, sorry for the break.
That's why I mandated the ATACMS and the supplemental, the long range, short range, and the HIMARS, that your administration is tying their hands behind their back.
We understand that parties are using this situation in Ukraine in their favor, blaming their opponents, so don't put attention on that stuff over here.
Unlike what you're trying to do in Israel, will you change this policy so Ukraine can fight without one hand tied behind its back?
Well, as you know, we've rallied 50 countries over the last 2 years to come to Ukraine's defense, to provide it with the weapons it needs to defend itself, to push back against Russian aggression. When it comes to enabling, endorsing attacks outside of Ukraine, that's not something we've done, but Ukraine will have to make and will make its own decisions, and I want to make sure it gets the equipment that it needs to effectively defend itself.
Congress got them the equipment, and thank you for implementing that, but Congress did not put restrictions on the use of these weapons. It's Jake Sullivan and your administration that has put the restrictions on these weapons, and I talked to them, and this is not, they cannot achieve victory with these restrictions that you, not the Congress, have placed on them. And I hope you'll take that back to the National Security Advisor and the National Security Council and change this policy decision that is very dangerous and damaging to the Ukrainian people.
So at least talks and dialogue is ongoing. Well, Biden's administration, White House administration in general, is also responsible for national security. And for now, I guess they still think that we shouldn't escalate at this particular point. But something tells me that those restrictions are up to be lifted. And it's gonna happen very soon. My friends, if you want to support the job that I do daily on YouTube, you might join my Patreon page. It is available with my personal link in the video description just below, or just scan the QR code available on the screen. Thank you so much for your awesome support. Right now, about the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, he was asked the question whether Ukraine should be allowed to use long-range weaponry, American-made weaponry, to attack the Russian territory. Well, let's listen to that.
Speaker, could I ask a quick question? Your colleagues from House Intelligence Committee, they just released a statement in which they're calling for administration to allow Ukraine to use American weaponry on the military targets on Russian territory. Would you support that? Because right now they have weapons, but they have restrictions to use that.
I think we need to allow Ukraine to prosecute the war and the way they see fit. They need to be able to fight back, and I think us trying to micromanage the effort there is not good policy for us. So I agree with that.
So again, we have the similar statement from the speaker. It's awesome. Mike Johnson totally changed his policy. It is absolutely great for Ukraine. So we see those politicians, if it is profitable for them, they are willing to change. A few months ago, they didn't want to give Ukraine weaponry, and now they want Ukraine to use weaponry on the Russian territory, mainly to blame White House administration for the wrongdoing to get more points. The most important for Ukraine that the talks are ongoing. Zelensky is planning to visit France to negotiate the topic as well. Also, one more question is to convince our allies to use their air defense over Ukrainian territory. To protect at least the western side of Ukraine, it might help to save Ukrainian economy, because with most of the power plants targeted, it's impossible for Ukrainian economy to function normally. In that case, Ukraine would need more support from our allies, so I think that it's more profitable for the Western countries to secure Ukrainian territory rather than to give funds non-stop. Also, they will discuss the confiscation of the Russian assets from the European and American banks. And if we check the current situation on the ground, for example, in Kharkiv Oblast, you may see that Russian advancement slowed down gradually. So Ukraine, even without the robust defense lines near the border, was capable to stop the fast Russian attack. And there are absolutely no changes for today from what I can say, judging on a military map. What concerns me just a little is this Russian maneuver to Zabina village, so there's the risk that they might cross the river in this area and attack Ukrainian forces from behind. For sure, Ukrainian command knows about it. By the way, we're gonna speak about the Ukrainian command today because nothing is perfect out there too. Unfortunately, I think that our allies might influence the Ukrainian army even more because some of the decisions they make are sometimes quite strange. So, Sumy region with its main city of Sumy and Russia continue to concentrate their forces near the border with Ukraine. Ukrainian forces were capable to target some of the Russian units with Soviet artillery systems and the FPV drones, but Russia continued to send the reinforcements to the region. This shaking camera video was shared on internet today, showing lots of the armored vehicles of the Russian army and supply trucks which they sent to Sumy region. The new marking was put on those vehicles, as you may see. Here we see some of the engineering equipment and mostly supply trucks, but if we skip a little, you may see also artillery systems, tanks, and vehicles are going. Kind of the long train, I may admit, and commenters are saying that it reminds them the preparation of the Russian army sending their forces before the full-scale war in Ukraine, which they started in 2022. Well, indeed, Russia is sending lots of the forces, and from what I see, all of those tracks are mainly new made. So Russia was producing them, putting aside and sorting for this mission. It was the Russian plan to start the intervention again into Kharkiv and Sumy regions. I expect that the attack on Sumy region might start in the coming days. So in this case, it would be very profitable for Ukraine to hit all of the Russian supply lines and bases on the Russian territory to cause the chaos in the Russian army supplies before they start this attack, so it would be not that effective. But unfortunately, we will not have that main decision from the United States by that time. In the new military package from the United States, Ukraine has received lots of the Stingers and missiles for those manpads. From the start of this month, they are in active use by Ukrainian forces, and it's already the 5th Sukhoi 25 attack airplane which Russia loses in May. An absolutely great result for Ukrainian defenders. Russia has never lost those many aircraft per month. I mean that particular aircraft type, attack airplanes. It's the Soviet analog of A-10. which is, I would say, less capable than A-10. Ukraine has put the rocket artillery systems on top of the Magura drone boats. There are at least 6 of the shells, 3 by each side. Well, the good thing that they may hit targets from the distance now, not being targeted by the ship machine guns or even spotted by the Russian side. The downside that the drones became heavier, so the range reduced, obviously. Plus, those missiles are uncontrollable, so you need to launch them from more or less close distance till your target to be able to hit something, otherwise they will fly to random places. Well, there was the attempt by Ukraine to install the air-to-air missiles on top of those drones. This idea didn't work from what I see. The Russian helicopters are still able to hit those drones, judging on the videos which were shared on internet. According to the British Defense Secretary Shabs, China has crossed the line and started to supply lethal weaponry to Russia. The British side is not publishing that evidence yet, but Shabs says that China is lying, then it says that they are not supplying lethal weaponry to Russia. I think it is inevitable the situation in general will start to escalate. Unfortunately, Ukraine is now a battlefield between democracies and autocracies, and we witness how the new coalition forms between China, Russia, Iran and North Korea. I would say that it has already been formed. Even though the official coalition hasn't been created, but it works. Russia gets supplies to continue the war in Ukraine, and I think that without support from the North Korea and first of all China, Russia wouldn't be able to perform the attack missions in Ukraine. In that case, they would lose the ground. I think that politicians on the West should finally understand that it is much bigger war than they think. It is not the regional conflict between Ukraine and Russia for Donbass, as Russia says, Russian-speaking Donbass. No, it has nothing common to do with that. Russia just uses this small lever to expand its influence. And China, as we see, is doing their best to help Russia. More news from UK. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says that the current parliament will be dissolved and new elections will be held on July the 4th. Kind of interesting date, but anyways. Alright guys, I want to share the truthful information on my channel, and sometimes I criticize the Ukrainian military command or Ukrainian politicians. It is normal. Actually, we should do it, otherwise mistakes will stay hidden. And I'm not alone with that. Lots of the military bloggers of Ukraine and volunteers started to post those very important news about the military command mistake that Ukraine done. We are speaking about the directive which goes from the General Staff of Ukrainian Command to send the drone operators as close to the fighting line, to the actual fighting line, as possible. All of the combat drone operators should be moved to the distance of 1.5 kilometers from the actual fighting line. As I told you, this information was shared by many of our soldiers even, and drone operators plus Ternenko, who is the biggest Ukrainian volunteer if we speak about the drone delivery, so he's also very concerned about this stuff because this decision is illogical. Sometimes the gray area itself is around 3 up to 5 kilometers. Also, as we saw in Kharkivska Oblast and in Ocheretina, Russia might advance very fast. And the main skill of the drone operators is to fly the drones, not to actively combat with the Russian attacking forces. I mean direct fight in the trenches. They'll be just easy targets for Russians. Also, from what I understood, our drone operators are using the special hardware against the Russian drone jammers, but that hardware might create some sort of the interference between each other if you put units together. That's why if you put them all in one line, 1.5 kilometers away from the active combat line, they'll create distortion. The good thing is to put them aside further away from the front line. Also, the modern-day FPV combat drones have the range up to 15 kilometers, which is quite a lot and guarantees the safety for the personnel if they stay sheltered somewhere in the settlements and not in the trench with the fighting infantry right on the front line. It's just crazy. Also, our drone soldiers start to share more information about the drones which they obtain from the government. The quality of those drones is not really good. They are very vulnerable against the Russian electronic warfare, so what volunteers are creating is much better. Well, hopefully with this massive hype about this issue, I think that Ukrainian General Staff will change its decision. Because even for me, it looks very, very stupid. I also worry about it because many of my mates are fighting as the drone operators. Meanwhile, there was the investigation started in Ukraine because of the poor-made defense lines of the Kharkiv region. On this image presented by the deep state, you may see a well-made defense line, so an anti-tank trench, 3 rows of the Dragon T's, dots and infantry trenches. But I think that it is not the Ukrainian defense line, it is the Russian one, also not far away from Kharkiv, but on the Russian territory of Belgorod Oblast. And try to guess the distance to the Ukrainian border. It's a little bit more than 300 meters. And you know, Russians somehow were able to build defense on their territory very close to Ukrainian border. They didn't complain about any sort of the attacks on them from Ukrainian side, even though there were those, but they just built the stuff because they think that it's important. In Ukraine, we understand that it wasn't done properly. That's why now the special commission created by Ukrainian parliament is now investigating the stuff. The defense lines are crucial to save the lives of our soldiers. Yeah, we still have those, but not as robust as Russia is capable to build on their territory. The Economist says that Zelensky shouts at generals because they report the different stuff from reality of what is happening on the front lines to Ukrainian politician managers as Zelensky himself. And you know, guys, my personal opinion, just my personal opinion, that this guy should have stayed as the commander of Ukrainian army. The United States intelligence claims that Russia sent to the space the weaponry which might fight against the satellites. There were some of the rumors before that Russia wants to place some of the nukes in the space. Russia dismissed those allegations, but nevertheless we know that Russia is working on the projects to be able to disturb the Allies' satellite communication, or even the GPS system which is actively used by the American military. Well, what type of the weaponry Russia has delivered to the space is yet unknown, at least to the public, but I'm sure that the United States intelligence knows the stuff. Sweden wants to reinforce the defense of the Gotland Island. The commander-in-chief of the Swedish Armed Forces, Boden, probably it sounds like that, announced this statement. It happened after the information started to appear in internet that Russia wants to expand its sea waters in the Gulf of Finland and near Kaliningrad. The Gotland Island is crucial for defense of the Baltic Sea. Until it's controlled by NATO, the Baltic Sea is fine. You see, even though Russia is kind of the big country, especially on the Google Maps, yes, it's not the real size of Russia, and you see lots of the waters are surrounding Russia, but just few ports are suitable for the Russian military or for the Russian oil tankers and other vessels. The Baltic Sea is very important for Russia. They have one port in St. Petersburg and the other one in Kaliningrad for the military and for their experts. But I think that all of those countries, except Russia in the place, are the NATO members. So it's kind of easy for NATO to block the Baltic Sea for Russia in case the situation would start to escalate dramatically. And there now the talks from Finland, for example, they want to block the Russians' shadow fleet, which exports oil. Finland and the United Kingdom are negotiating the efforts for the possible blockade of the Russian fleet. Russia sends around 100 of those shadow tankers through the Gulf of Finland each month. They do not have any Western insurance and they sell oil to the third countries without any set price limit. Basically, it's the main income for the Russian oil companies, so the Russian budget. Well, hopefully allies will introduce the ban on those ships. The other warm water Russian ports are located in the Black Sea. We're speaking about occupied Crimea and Novorossiysk. This is the biggest oil port of Russia in the Black Sea. But the situation for Russia here is the same as in the Baltic Sea. Turkey is the NATO member and it may easily block the Bosphorus Strait, restricting all of the Russian military. The other Russian ports are mainly unusable during the cold time of the year. For this reason, Russia creates the icebreaker vessels. But those are damn slow and easy potential targets for the NATO allies. So I want to recommend Russia to escalate on the waters, otherwise they will be just blocked. Alright, Russia is preparing their airplanes for the future F-16s delivery to the Ukrainian Air Force. For example, here we see the Russian Sukhoi 30 SM-2, which is equipped with R-37M and R-77-1 air-to-air missiles. Previously, those missiles were installed just on Sukhoi 35 and MiG-31BM. According to developers, the range of the missiles could reach 300 kilometers. I think it's the longest range missile which Russia has, I mean air-to-air missile. But we know that the range of the radar of the airplane, which is located in the nose cone, is lower than that. However, Sukhoi 35 has the most powerful radars from all of the fighter jets in the world. Because of that, they may use those missiles way more effectively compared to Sukhoi Su-30. So again, Ukrainian military command should be concerned that F-16s would arrive to Ukraine of how to use them in the most efficient way to bypass this possible threat. Well, to do it, I think Ukraine needs many more F-16s to operate in an effective manner. The scandal occurred within the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Armenia claimed that 2 of the member countries support the intervention of Azerbaijan into Karabakh back in 2020. Interesting, what kind of the countries are those? We know that Armenia stopped its membership in the organization, but in the future I think they will leave it. According to many of the media sources and official statements, the situation with artillery shells is getting better for Ukrainian army. That's why I think Ukraine was capable to slow down Russian army advancement in many of the points of the front lines. Awesome news, and it was possible because the United States of America joined again with their massive military support. After losing some of the expensive MQ Reaper drones near Yemen, the United States Army started to use Ultra drones. They have the surveillance equipment installed and they may fly for a very long range, also at a very high altitude. The American drone looks very similar to the Stemme glider. I think it's the good drone for surveillance, but it's unable to carry missiles like MQ Reaper. Now about the frontline changes, we have the confirmation from the military analytics that Russia moved a little bit forward in Chasiv Yar, and that's it. Also just a slight advancement near Ocheretine. As you see, mainly Russian attacks bogged down for this moment, but as I showed you in the first half of the video, Russia is sending more forces and they're gonna use them probably in some of the new directions. Russia still has the big plans for the summer campaign Ukraine will have to defend, at least this year. My friends, please don't forget to press your huge like to this video. By doing so, you help me a lot. As usual, I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time.